There's a lot of baseball in this world. So many baseball fans just realized that this year, in the absence of Major League Baseball. Some of us knew that already. Since I started this channel, I've been closely following leagues I'd never taken more than a glance at before. I try not to pick favorites in any of these leagues, because I want to be as unbiased as possible. But the more you watch a league, the more likely it is that one particular team starts to grow on you, and before you know it, you're a fan for life. So today I'm doing something a little different. I'm naming my favorite team in 14 professional baseball leagues around the world, and I want you to do the same. In the comments, let us know what leagues you follow and what are your favorite teams, even if it's just one or two leagues you watch. Most of these teams I don't feel too strongly about, but I have a reason to root for them, and I will give those reasons. The ones towards the end of the video I do feel strongly about. Remember those team names, and in future videos, if it seems like I'm being biased towards any of them, don't be afraid to point it out. 4 leagues that I do not have a favorite team in are the Cuban National Series, the Colombian League, the Nicaraguan League, and Pro Base in Panama, all winter leagues. Notice that the first 3 leagues I haven't done a video about yet, where I introduce the teams, players, league history, playoff format, etc. When I research for those videos, I learn all about the league, then I keep track of the league during the regular season, and that's when I develop a liking for one certain team. I have done a video about Pro Base, but that was after their season had already ended, just before the Caribbean Series, so I never had a chance to follow the league during the season. Well, since I've already mentioned the region, let's begin with the Caribbean Winter Leagues. First, I'll talk about LIDOM in the Dominican Republic. Last year was the first year I kept up with this league during the season. Couldn't catch any live games, but I watched highlights and checked the standings week after week. The one team I couldn't help rooting for was Estrellas Orientales. I was actually kind of a fan of this team before I started following the league. I remembered them from the 2019 Caribbean Series after winning the LIDOM title for the first time in 49 years. And because they have never won the Caribbean Series, part of me was wishing they would win it. I don't always go with the teams that have an historical record of losing, but it just seems that a ball club with so much history, going back over a century, should have more than 4 championships by now. So Estrellas Orientales is my favorite team in LIDOM. In the LBPRC in Puerto Rico, my team is Cangrejeros de Santurce, a team known for winning. They've won more games than any other team in LBPRC and are the defending league champions. Last year I was impressed with this team and had high hopes for them in the Caribbean Series. I picked them to finish second, but they bowed out in the semis. More reasons to root for this team. Puerto Rico's most famous ball player, the one the league is named after, Roberto Clemente, started his career with Cangrejeros. And their ballpark, Estadio Hiram Betorn, is the best known in the Caribbean and is definitely on my list of stadiums to visit in my lifetime. In the LVBP in Venezuela, the name that stood out to me right away was Navegantes del Magallanes, the Magellan Navigators. Beyond the name, I learned that the Navigators are part of the country's biggest rivalry with Leones del Caracas. Navigators are the less successful team in this rivalry and play in a smaller city. I love rivalries, and I like to root for the underdog, as long as they're not too much of an underdog, and Navegantes fit that description. In the LMB, Mexico's Summer League, my favorite team is one I've been rooting for quite a while now, Sultanas de Monterrey. The Sultans have everything I look for in a team. A loyal fan base that supports the team, even when they're down, a long successful history, but not too successful, and I've said before that Monterrey has the best chance of any city outside of the US and Canada for an expansion team in Major League Baseball. I'd like to see that happen one day, and I'd hope they'd keep the name Sultans, so I can't help but root for this team. The Sultans are the only team that plays in both the Summer and Winter Leagues of Mexico. Knowing that, you probably think it's logical that they'd be my favorite Winter League team too. Well, they're not. They just joined the LMP last year, so they don't really feel like a Winter League team, more like an invader. I already had a team in LMP, and that is Águilas de Mexicali. One player I really like in MLB is pitcher Jeff Samardzija, who comes from the same area as me. Early in his career, he spent a winter with Águilas, and they've been my favorite team ever since. Last year, I watched a lot of Águilas games on LMP's YouTube channel, a much improved team over the previous year, but not contenders yet. In Italy, my team is Nettuno Ball Club. If I ever had to move to Europe, for whatever reason, I would want to live in Nettuno. The reason being that baseball is really big there, but it's not big everywhere else in Europe. I can deal with a different language, different food, different culture, but as long as I'm surrounded by baseball fans, I'll feel right at home. In the Netherlands, last year I was rooting for HCAW, Honkbal Club Allen Weerbaar, and I have a good reason for that. Neptunus has won the championship 8 times in the last 12 years. The Amsterdam Pirates won it 3 times during that span, including last year when they beat Neptunus in the Holland Series. As you can see, that doesn't leave much room for other teams. HCAW was 3rd last year, the only other team over 500, and I'm hoping that this year they can rise to the top and bring some unpredictability to the playoffs. Season starts next week, July 18th. It's a similar situation in the Czech Extraliga. Drossi Brno has dominated the last 25 years. In the last few years, Eros Ostrava has been challenging them for the top spot. Presently, Eros Ostrava and Drossi Brno are 1 and 2 in the standings. I'd like to see this broken up, so I'm pulling for Eagles Praha. They're a good team that always finishes in the top half of the standings. Right now they're in 4th place, 3 games out of 1st. In Germany, I have not yet followed a season of baseball Bundesliga, but I already know who my favorite team is. The Munich Hard Disciples have their own YouTube channel and stream their games with English commentary. Whenever this season gets started, I'm going to watch games on that channel. It's inevitable that after seeing a few games, they'll become my favorite German baseball team. In the Australian Baseball League, I guess I should be a Sydney Blue Sox fan. I've been to Sydney before and I know people there. But the team for me is the Auckland Tuatara. I was really glad when the ABL decided to expand into New Zealand 2 years ago, but I wasn't sure how well the new team would be supported. That has proven to not be a problem. Last year they were an exciting team to watch, reaching the postseason in only their 2nd year in the ABL. And Tuatara is a really cool mascot that could only work in New Zealand. Over to Asia now. These teams I am a pretty big fan of. First, the KBO. I've followed the KBO off and on for about 10 years, but I admit that I never really followed it closely until this year. My team there is the LG Twins. I said earlier that I really enjoy rivalries. The Twins and the Doosan Bears make up the greatest rivalry in Korean sports. What makes this rivalry so great is that they share a stadium, so when they play each other, both teams are playing at home. The home crowd advantage depends on how many of a team's fans show up and how much noise they can make. As I have a habit of doing, I've gone with the less successful team in the rivalry. The Bears have won the Korean Series 6 times, including 3 of the last 5 years. My Twins have only won it twice, and not since '94. In the CPBL, I've become a really big fan of the China Trust brothers. Before I get into my reasons, yes, I know that there are a lot of reasons not to like the brothers. They are a bandwagon team that has enough fans as it is, and their fans have been involved in some pretty ugly incidents in the recent past, more than any other fan base in Taiwan. But since I first learned about the CPBL, I've always found this team interesting, just from their name and uniforms. I'm talking about when they were called the Brother Elephants. A silly name, but one you never forget. And for me, whenever I heard about the CPBL, the first thing that came to mind was the Brother Elephants in their yellow uniforms. In April of this year, I became a huge Brothers fan. Like many others, I watched the first professional baseball game of 2020 anywhere in the world, and it was a Brothers home game. Since then, I've been watching them every chance I get. Now over to Japan, where I've spent the last 13 years. I married into a Giants family, where their living room contained a big Jabbit doll and a picture of the Giants team celebrating their 2002 Japan Series championship. It would have been awkward, to say the least, if I had chosen another team to root for, so I immediately became a Giants fan. And from the place I ended up living, Tokyo Dome was the nearest ballpark, so I was able to attend games often. Most baseball fans in the area were Giants fans, so it gave us something to talk about. In 2009, I caught at least a dozen games at Tokyo Dome, knew all the players, all the chants, and the Giants ended up winning the Japan Series that year. I don't get out to the ballpark as much these days, but I'm still a huge fan. I don't have a strong favorite in the Pacific League, but I lean toward the Cebu Lions. They are the nearest Pacific League team to where I live. A lot of respect for their organization and their fans. Then there's Major League Baseball. For the first 10 years of my life, I lived in the Chicago area, so there were 2 teams I could have gone with. I'm sure there were some White Sox fans there, but I don't recall ever meeting any. Everyone I knew was a Cubs fan, so it was the only team for me. I got to go to Wrigley Field when Sammy Sosa was a young rising star, Greg Maddux was in his prime, and Harry Carey was still alive singing "Take Me Out to the Ball Game." They didn't win much back then, but that just made me get behind them even more. It was all worth it when they finally won it all in 2016. And that's it. Now you know where my bias is. Hope my subscriber count doesn't fall too much because of this. Anyway, until next time, this is Baseball International. See ya.